And without further ado, I would like to introduce our first storyteller, Krish Eswaran, who is also famous. Had a story about the one time he was the only one of his friends who was excited about taking a test. And not just any test, but the Huntington Test.
Frank just wanted us to see the Golden Gate Bridge, but instead we were stuck inside a scientist's office. Mickey just wanted to chill, but instead he was being grilled by the same scientist who was questioning not only his choice of major, but also his general intelligence. I just wanted to be entertained. And I was. Frank, Mickey, and I had been members of our junior high school math club. So it was only fitting that Frank, now our tour guide across the Bay Area, had seen fit for us to view the Golden Gate Bridge from Evans Hall, Berkeley's math building. The building boasted a balcony that offered an unobstructed view of both the Golden Gate Bridge as well as the San Francisco skyline. There was just one problem. Access to the balcony was locked, and Frank didn't have the key. It was also the weekend, and there was no one around to help us. We were in a hallway that was filled with closed doors, except for one down at the corner that was slightly ajar. We proceeded to walk to that door, and as we got close, we noticed a sign that said, "Visiting Scientist" on it. As soon as we noticed the sign, it was about that time when the door swung fully open, and out came this supposed visiting scientist, a white-haired man with an intent gaze and an unplaceable accent. Frank just got down to business. We're trying to access the balcony. Do you think you could help us? The man stared back at Frank. "What's your major?" he asked. Not sure how his major would affect balcony access, Frank responded, "Electrical engineering." The scientist immediately lost interest in Frank and turned his attention to me. He asked me the same question, to which I gave the same answer. Finally, it was Mickey's turn. "What's your major?" he asked Mickey. "Political science?" At this, the scientist's eyes widened. "Political science? Are you familiar with the works of Professor Samuel Huntington?" Whoa, I was not expecting that reaction. Who was this Samuel Huntington? Mickey offered a response. "Yes, Samuel Huntington's a professor at Harvard who wrote Clash of Civilizations about how all the world's conflicts can be traced back to just a few groups. Don't worry, I don't believe in his theories." Mickey's assurance that he didn't believe in Huntington's theories just set the scientist off even further. "It's not about belief. Belief is religion. This is a scandal. This is a scandal of the National Academies of Science. Come into my office. I'm going to give you the Huntington Test." Whoa! What is this Huntington Test? I just charged for the door and walked straight into his office. Frank and Mickey inched in reluctantly behind me. In fact, Frank tried to put a stop to all this. We have to go. We have to catch the next train to San Francisco." "Catch the next one. He has to understand that his entire field is a sham," said the scientist, and he started searching around the office for a sheet of paper, which I only assumed was the Huntington Test. He found it amidst a large stack and brought it back to us triumphantly. First he approached Frank. "Can you tell us the difference between a fact and a hole in the ground?" Now, I've heard the expression that some people don't know their ass from a hole in the ground, but the scientist's fact from a hole in the ground variation was new to me. Frank handled it like a pro. "Yes." He turned and asked the same question to me. "Can you tell the difference between a fact and a hole in the ground?" I also responded, "Yes." Finally, he set his eyes on Mickey. "Can you tell the difference between a fact and a hole in the ground?" To which Mickey responded, yes. And the scientist, with a mischievous smile, said, ha! I'm going to give you the Huntington Test. Read this paragraph by Fareed Zakaria and tell me what you think. Whoa, what had Fareed Zakaria written? I leaned over Mickey's shoulder to find out. It turns out in the paragraph, Fareed Zakaria had written about Samuel Huntington. He actually quoted him. And in the quote, Huntington defined a satisfied society as one in which there were no major riots or disturbances. He then proceeded to explain that in the 1960s, South Africa fit this definition of a satisfied society because there were no major riots or disturbances. I thought for a second about South African apartheid, and that claim struck me as completely false. Mickey didn't see it that way. Based on the definition and facts presented, one can reasonably conclude that South Africa fits the definition of a satisfied society. The scientist looked at him, and I tried to warn Mickey. I just said, no, but the scientist just cut me off. He looked at him and said, ha! You failed the Huntington Test. If you look at the microfiche from the 1960s, you will find that there were, in fact, protests and disturbances in South Africa during that time. Let me give you my book. I was amazed. I was imagining this scientist going into a library, searching through articles from the 1960s, going through microfiche, just trying to prove Samuel Huntington wrong. There was more to this story than meets the eye. But Frank and Mickey were just not having it. Mickey's eyes were cast down, and Frank was really ready to go. He reiterated again that we had to leave. At which point the scientist scribbled something on a sheet of paper and handed it to Mickey. That's my address. Send me a letter and I'll send you my book. At that point, Frank and Mickey just bolted. They left the room. I tried to catch up. I eventually did. And when I did, I noticed a sheet of paper and the name on it. It was, wait for it, Serge Lang. That's about the reaction I was expecting. For those of you who aren't math nerds, Serge Lang is one of the most prolific authors of mathematical textbooks, having authored over 50 undergraduate and graduate textbooks in topics ranging from abstract algebra to functional analysis. Having him quiz us about how to reason was like going to Babe Ruth and getting advice about how to swing a baseball bat, or going to Stanley Kubrick and having him give us advice on how to write a screenplay. I was so pumped to write a letter to him. So I went up to Mickey later that night and I asked him, hey, do you have Serge Lang's address? But Mickey had lost it. Didn't matter. I looked up Samuel Huntington and Serge Lang on the internet, and I found out that Samuel Huntington had been nominated to the National Academies of Science. And typically when you're nominated to the National Academies of Science, it's a foregone conclusion that you're going to be inducted. But not this time. Serge Lang had successfully run a campaign to block Samuel Huntington's election into the National Academy of Science. So, at the end of it, we didn't get to see the Golden Gate Bridge that night. But I found the view inside that office way more interesting. I guess I just don't know the difference between a beautiful view and a hole in the ground.